A mammal relies on a centralized mechanical pump. A plant possesses no heart, yet displaces massive volumes of fluid hundreds of feet into the air. A single mature tree must lift hundreds of gallons of water from the soil to its canopy every single day. Without moving parts, overcoming this sheer gravitational load presents a severe engineering problem. Plants solve this physics problem by operating two distinct parallel vascular systems, each governed by completely different physiological rules. The first system is a completely passive dead hydraulic network that is driven entirely by the atmosphere. The second is a living bidirectional distribution grid governed directly by the plant's metabolic demands. A plant is a highly optimized dual network fluid distribution machine. To understand how it operates, we have to reverse engineer its internal plumbing, starting in the soil and ending in the canopy. The entire process begins at the microscopic level, specifically at the root hair cell, which serves as the primary interface for resource acquisition. These cells feature an elongated geometry. This structural extension, mathematically, maximizes the available surface area, allowing the plant to interface with as much surrounding soil as possible. This micrograph cross-section of a buttercup root shows how these outer root hair cells relate to the larger anatomy. Resources absorbed at the outer edge must travel inward through the cortex cells to reach the dense vascular bundle in the center. But here, the plant faces an immediate biological barrier. The mineral ions it needs are often at a much lower concentration in the soil than they are inside the root itself, meaning passive diffusion cannot occur. To acquire these minerals, the plant utilizes active transport. It must expend respiratory energy to forcefully move particles through the cell membrane against the concentration gradient. The cell expends this energy to physically alter the shape of embedded protein carriers, locking onto specific molecules outside the cell and pushing them inward. This creates a deliberate, highly beneficial osmotic consequence. By artificially packing its interior with mineral ions, the root hair cell drastically lowers its own internal water potential. Because the surrounding soil now holds a higher water potential than the interior of the root, water molecules are naturally forced across the partially permeable membrane into the cell via osmosis. Plants do not passively soak up water like sponges. They actively manipulate local thermodynamics, expending energy to force the environment to yield its resources. Once that water moves across the root cortex cells, it enters the plant's central plumbing network, a system known as the xylem. The anatomy of the xylem is entirely specialized for bulk fluid transport. It is a continuous network of dead, hollowed-out cells joined end to end. There are no cell organelles and no crosswalls obstructing the path. The walls of these hollow tubes are thickened with a complex substance called lignin. This lignin is a structural necessity. As water is pulled vertically through the plant, it generates immense negative pressure. The rigid lignin prevents the hollow xylem tubes from collapsing inward under that stress. The source of that negative pressure is located at the top of the system. In the leaf, water continuously evaporates from the surfaces of the mesophyll cells into the internal air spaces. This water vapor then diffuses out of the leaf through tiny pores called stomata, a process defined as transpiration. Because of a physical property called cohesion, water molecules maintain a strong intermolecular attraction. They hold on to each other, forming a continuous, unbroken vertical chain inside the xylem. When a single water molecule evaporates and exits the leaf, it physically pulls the molecule beneath it upward. This creates a transpiration pull. The upward movement of water is dictated entirely by this negative pressure pulling from the canopy, rather than osmotic pressure pushing from the roots. The xylem operates as a passive hydraulic lift. This allows the plant to move massive volumes of fluid without spending any metabolic energy. It is powered entirely by the sun and the atmosphere. Moving water is only half the problem. The plant must also distribute the complex carbohydrates, specifically sucrose and amino acids, synthesized by the leaves during photosynthesis. The xylem is strictly a one-way upward channel. It cannot distribute heavy metabolic products downward to the roots or sideways to a growing branch. For this, the plant relies on the phloem. In stark contrast to the dead, hollow tubes of the xylem, the phloem is constructed entirely of living cells. Because these cells are alive, they can actively manage the bidirectional flow of nutrients, moving materials up and down within the very same vascular bundle. This deliberate transport of sucrose and amino acids through the plant network is called translocation. The logistics of translocation depend on regions called sources, the specific parts of the plant that produce or release these assimilates. Nutrients flow from these sources to sinks, the regions where the molecules are actively utilized for respiration or stored for future use. While the xylem is bound by the physics of evaporation, the phloem operates as a demand-driven logistics grid governed by the plant's immediate metabolic needs. Flow direction within the phloem shifts based on environmental conditions and the organism's growth stages. This diagram maps the seasonal cycles of a plant. In summer, mature leaves actively photosynthesize, making them the primary source of sucrose. During this phase, roots act as the primary sink, receiving that continuous flow of sucrose and storing it as starch. The system flips during the spring. Before new leaves fully mature and photosynthesize, the plant requires massive amounts of energy to grow. The roots transition from sink to source, exporting stored energy upwards to supply the growing shoots, which have now become the primary sinks. Resource distribution in a plant is a highly agile network that reroutes itself in direct response to the calendar year. The result is a perfect division of labor. The xylem provides a dead, lignified, unidirectional network driven by atmospheric transpiration. The phloem provides a living, bidirectional network driven by metabolic translocation. In the soil, the plant uses cellular energy to artificially crash its own water potential, hijacking the physics of osmosis to draw in water and minerals. In the canopy, it utilizes the simple evaporation of water to create a continuous hydraulic pull capable of lifting that fluid against gravity. The survival of massive plant structures relies on a complete mastery of fluid dynamics and thermodynamic gradients.